This video is brought to you by my YouTube memberships. To get access to exclusive perks and have the ability to nominate and vote for monthly retro movie reviews, consider joining as a YouTube member today. Hey everyone, it's Alexander Robinson. Welcome to the channel, and this is my review for Whisper of the Heart, which is a 1995 animated film from Studio Ghibli, written by Hayao Miyazaki and directed by Yoshifumi Kundo. The movie follows Suzuki Tsukishima, a schoolgirl who's living in Tokyo with her parents, and her older sister who's in college. She is not that prioritized with her future, like going to high school. She's in middle school now, but she spends most of her time reading a lot of books and wanting to pursue her own passions. One thing that she notices every time she checks out a book from the library is that each of those books are checked out by the same person, Seiji Amasawa. So she tries to figure out, who is this person and do we share the same interests? And through a couple of mysterious and possibly fantastical circumstances, she meets Amasawa and the two of them start having feelings towards each other. This is a movie that's been requested by my YouTube members. Every month I ask the YouTube memberships to both nominate a movie that they want me to review for retro movie reviews, and then they all vote on a movie. And this movie ended up being this month's request, and once again nominated by Brandon Ferretti. So thank you for that. Although there was actually a tie between this and another movie, which I'll address at the end of this video. But I was really looking forward to seeing this because I've only reviewed one Studio Ghibli movie on this channel, The Wind Rises, way back in 2014 actually, because I think it came out in 2013 in Japan, and I didn't get to see it until the following year. I have seen other movies from Studio Ghibli, like Howl's Moving Castle, The Boy and the Heron from 2 years ago. I know I've seen Spirited Away. I mean, that's the one that everyone has seen. And up until today's movie, Whisper of the Heart, those are all the movies in Studio Ghibli's filmography that I have seen. I have not seen My Neighbor Totoro, I have not seen Kiki's Delivery Service, I have not seen Princess Mononoke, so I clearly have a major blind spot when it comes to Studio Ghibli. And with most of their movies, I expect some sort of high fantasy element to them, or at the very least, a bizarre, fantastical element to these films. And that's what I expected when I popped on Whisper of the Heart, something that was very much high fantasy or had a strong fantastical element to it. And that's not what this movie is at all. This is very much a coming-of-age story, very down-to-earth, and the only fantasy elements in this film are either within the main character's imagination near the end of the film, or they are implied. Like, yeah, there might be a fantastical element to some of these scenarios, but you could also see it as just a matter of fate. And I ended up really loving this movie. And something crossed my mind when watching this movie, considering that it's a romance film. It's very much down to earth with very slightly implied fantasy elements to it. This is not a movie America would ever make. Obviously, Japanese and American cultures are vastly different from one another, especially when it comes to animated films. But this is not something you'd ever see DreamWorks or Walt Disney Studios or even Pixar make. Because the closest movie I can think of to compare to Whisper of the Heart is probably WALL-E, but even then that has a lot of the elements that you'd see from more American animated films. There's got to be some big action set pieces, a lot of visual gags here and there. I mean, don't get me wrong, I adore WALL-E. It's in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. But Whisper of the Heart is more subtle. Like, this could have been any live-action movie in America, sure, but it would never pass as an animated film in the States. And I think that's what makes this a little more special. Now, I do have to make a disclaimer and say that when I watched this movie, I streamed it on Max, and it only had the dubbed version. And usually when it comes to foreign films, especially from Japan, I prefer to watch these movies in their native language with subtitles. But Studio Ghibli's an exception because they always get a great cast to do the English dub of their films. And this movie is no exception. Even though this film came out in 1995, it didn't get an English dub until 2003, and then that dub didn't actually get released until 3 years later in 2006. So the dub that we got in this movie is very well done. You have Brittany Snow voicing the main character, and this was before she went on to do Pitch Perfect, and she, for lack of a better phrase, is pitch perfect as this main character. Suzuki is very much a standard middle school girl. She has dreams and aspirations of doing something that's not expected from her family. She is very protective of her friends. She is very aggressive towards anybody that picks on her or her friends. And when she meets Seiji for the first time, she doesn't know who he is, and they come across as very aggravating towards each other. She ends up being very aggravated towards him because he made fun of her reworking of the song Take Me Home Country Road, which actually plays a lot throughout this movie. The movie actually opens up with a rendition from Olivia Newton-John, and then it ends with a Japanese version of that song. The more times they encounter each other through circumstance, and the more they get to know each other, the more they actually start falling in love, and it's a very believable romance in the way that two middle schoolers would fall in love with each other. As for the fantasy element of this movie, again, it's very vague to the point where it's probably more implied than anything. Shizuki ends up seeing this stray cat on a train, and she ends up following it all across Tokyo to where she comes across this old antique shop where there's a statue of a cat named the Baron. And despite this version of the poster that shows the Baron and this young girl on an adventure, the Baron is mostly a statue, and there's a story behind this statue that brings the two main characters closer together, and all the fantasy elements involving the Baron actually being a real character, that's all interpreted through a book that Shizuki is writing in the third act of the film. There is a spin-off film that came out afterwards called The Cat Returns, which I've also heard is really good, so maybe I might see that at some point, because I've got a lot of Studio Ghibli to catch up on. Another thing that crossed my mind when watching this movie was where Yoshifumi Kundo's career as a director would have gone had he not passed away so soon. Kundo had worked at Studio Ghibli for a long time. He worked on several animated films, but this is his only effort as a director, and unfortunately he passed away 3 years after the movie came out. Studio Ghibli actually looked to him as probably being the next guy to take over after Hayao Miyazaki, but that just didn't happen, and it really makes me wonder, what kind of great movies would he have made had he lived longer? I don't really have much to say in terms of criticisms. The only thing that really kind of bugged me about this movie is that in the third act, Amasawa leaves for Italy for 2 months. And this is supposed to be a span of 2 months where Shizuki is writing this book and trying to get this all done before Amasawa returns to Japan. And I never really got the impression that it was 2 months. It felt more like a couple of days than anything, which, yes, I know it's impossible to write a book in a few days unless you're a straight-up hack, but I never got the impression that it was a 2-month span during this third act. That's really all I have to say in terms of negatives. Other than that, Whisper of the Heart is a masterpiece. I am so glad that the YouTube membership voted on this movie because I'd never seen it before, and I'm glad I did. It's a film that's easily worth seeing in your lifetime. If you are like me and you expect a lot of Studio Ghibli movies to have more of a fantasy element to them, you'll be pleasantly surprised at how grounded this one is. It's beautifully animated, the voice cast is fantastic, it's got a lot of great music from the score and the many renditions of Take Me Home Country Road, and I would really love to rewatch this movie in Japanese to see if it impacts me a lot more in its native language. I highly recommend this movie if you haven't seen it, because I'd never heard of it until it was suggested, and I feel like this might be one of Studio Ghibli's more underrated films. And there you go, that's my review for Whisper of the Heart. I hope you enjoyed it. Once again, I want to thank the YouTube members out there for voting on this movie, and Brandon Ferretti for nominating it. Now, earlier in the review, I said that this movie was actually tied in the voting for another movie, and that movie was the original Karate Kid from 1984. This movie was nominated by Real Explorer X, and because both of these movies were tied, I asked the YouTube members if you wanted to do a tie-breaking vote, or if you wanted me to save the Karate Kid for when Karate Kid Legends comes out in May. And the membership mostly voted on saving Karate Kid for May. and that's what I'm gonna do. I've never seen the original Karate Kid before. I had no plans to review all the Karate Kid movies leading up to the new one, so I'll review the original Karate Kid in May as that month's YouTube member request. So keep your eyes open for that review in May. And for those of you who are not YouTube members, but you want to participate in nominating and voting for one retro review a month, you can join YouTube memberships for as little as $1.99 a month. And at the first day of every month, I put out a call for movie nominations, and then I leave it for a vote until the middle of the month. It's a lot of fun. I can't wait to see what the membership nominates and votes for in March. Until then, thank you guys for watching this video, and I want to give a special thank you to not just my YouTube members right over here, but my YouTube subscribers. You guys are the reason why this channel continues to grow, and if you want to help to financially support the channel, you can do so via YouTube memberships for as little as $1.99 a month, as I said earlier. But until next time, I want to know what you guys think about Whisper of the Heart. Whatever your opinions are, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell button to get notifications. If you want to follow me elsewhere on the internet, you can do so via these social media platforms, including Flashes, which is Blue Sky's equivalent to Instagram, and my theme park and travel channel right here on YouTube. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, have a good day and take care of yourselves.